Every story has a beginning, but some beginnings are not gentle. Some beginnings are marked by silence, the kind of silence that hides pain, the kind that teaches a child to carry burdens too heavy for her small shoulders. Virginia Giuffre's story begins in that silence. In Nobody's Girl, she opens the door to her childhood, not to paint herself as a victim, but to show us how resilience is born in the darkest corners. She grew up in a world where safety was fragile, where trust was broken, where the people meant to protect her often failed. And yet, even in those early years, she carried a spark that would one day become a flame. She writes about the loneliness of being unseen, about the confusion of being hurt by those who should have offered love, about the way trauma burrows deep into a child's identity, shaping how she sees herself, how she trusts others, how she dreams. And here's the truth. Childhood trauma doesn't just vanish. It lingers. It whispers. It becomes the lens through which we see the world. Virginia's lens was cracked, but it was not shattered. She tells us about the small escapes she found, moments of laughter, fragments of normalcy, the rare kindnesses that reminded her she was still human. These moments mattered. They were her anchors, her proof that life could hold more than pain. But the silence was heavy. The silence taught her to hide, to endure, to survive. And survival became her skill. For many viewers, this part of her story will feel painfully familiar, because childhood trauma is not rare. Too many carry scars from homes that should have been safe. Too many know the weight of silence. Too many have learned to smile while breaking inside. Virginia's courage lies in naming it, in refusing to let silence win, in saying, "This happened, and I am still here." That act, the act of telling, is itself a rebellion. It is a way of reclaiming power. It is a way of saying, I will not be defined by what was done to me. I will be defined by what I choose to do next. And that choice begins here, in the telling of her childhood. She doesn't romanticize it. She doesn't soften it. She gives us the truth. Raw, unfiltered, painful. Because only in truth can healing begin. And as you listen, you may feel your own memories stir. You may feel the ache of recognition. You may feel the weight of your own silence. But here's the gift. Virginia's story reminds us that silence can be broken, that pain can be named, that scars can become stories, and stories can become light. Her childhood was marked by betrayal, but her adulthood would be marked by resilience. And this first chapter sets the stage for everything that follows. Because before she was an advocate, before she was a fighter, before she was a voice for justice, she was a child. Child who survived. A child who carried her light through the darkest nights. And that survival, it is the foundation of everything she became. If Virginia's childhood was marked by silence, her teenage years were marked by entrapment. At just 16, she was pulled into a world that promised glamour but delivered exploitation. Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell didn't appear as monsters at first. They appeared as opportunity, as wealth, as sophistication, as the kind of people who could open doors to a better life. But behind the polished exterior was a trap. Virginia describes how manipulation works, not as sudden violence, but as slow grooming. Begins with attention, with gifts, with promises, with the illusion of care. And for a young girl already carrying scars, that illusion can feel like salvation. But salvation quickly turns into captivity. Epstein and Maxwell built a web designed to ensnare. A web of power, money, and influence. A web that made escape feel impossible. Virginia was flown to exotic locations, dressed in expensive clothes, introduced to powerful men. On the surface it looked like privilege. In reality it was exploitation. She writes about the fear that lived in her body. The constant calculation of how to survive each day. The way her voice was stolen, her choices stripped away, her humanity reduced to transactions. And here's the chilling truth. Predators thrive on silence. They thrive on shame. They thrive on the belief that no one will listen, no one will care, no one will believe. Virginia's entrapment was not just physical. It was psychological, emotional. spiritual. She was told she was lucky. She was told she was chosen. She was told she was special. And yet, every gift carried chains. Every promise carried a price. This is the part of her memoir that forces us to confront uncomfortable realities. Because exploitation doesn't always look like violence in the shadows. Sometimes it looks like luxury. Sometimes it looks like power. Sometimes it looks like the very things society celebrates. Virginia's courage lies in exposing that illusion. In naming the trap for what it was. In showing us how predators disguise themselves as benefactors. And as you listen, you may feel anger rise. You may feel disbelief. You may feel the weight of injustice pressing against your chest. That reaction matters. Because Virginia's story is not just hers. It is the story of countless others who have been silenced, manipulated, and trapped. Her entrapment lasted years. Years of fear. Years of survival. Years of pretending. But even in the darkest corners of that web, she carried a spark. A spark that whispered, "This is not the end." And that spark would one day ignite into escape. Every web has an exit, but finding it takes courage. For Virginia Giuffre, that moment came at 19. After years of manipulation, fear, and exploitation, she chose to break free. And in that choice, she reclaimed her agency. She describes the decision not as sudden, but as a slow awakening. A realization that the promises were lies, that the luxury was a cage, that survival meant escape, and escape meant risk. Leaving Epstein and Maxwell's world was not simple. They had power. They had influence. They had built a system designed to keep her silent. But Virginia carried something stronger. The will to live. She tells us about the fear of walking away. About the uncertainty of what came next. About the voice inside her that whispered, "You deserve more." That whisper became her guide. At 19, she stepped out of the shadows. She left behind the mansion, the flights, the false promises. She walked into the unknown, carrying nothing but her courage. And here's the truth. Escape is not just physical. It is emotional. It is spiritual. It is the act of saying, "I am not what was done to me." Memoir. Virginia's escape was the beginning of her transformation. She began to rebuild her life, to rediscover her voice, to reclaim her identity. She writes about the small victories, finding safety, finding love, finding moments of peace. These victories mattered. They were proof that healing was possible. But healing is not linear. Trauma does not vanish overnight. The scars remained. The memories lingered. The nightmares returned. And yet she kept going. Her escape was not the end of her story. It was the beginning of her fight. Because leaving Epstein and Maxwell's world did not erase what had happened. It did not erase the injustice. It did not erase the silence. But it gave her the freedom to speak. Tell her story. To begin the long journey toward justice. And that journey would change everything. Virginia's escape at 19 is a reminder that courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is the decision to move forward despite fear. It is the moment when survival becomes resistance. When silence becomes voice. When victimhood becomes agency. Her story invites us to reflect. What cages have we accepted as normal? What lies have we believed? What fears have kept us trapped? And more importantly, what would it mean to break free? Virginia's choice at 19 was not easy. But it was necessary. And it set the stage for the fight that would follow. Because once she escaped, she was no longer just surviving. She was preparing to confront the darkness. To expose the truth. To demand justice. And that fight, the fight for justice, is where her story turns from survival to advocacy. Breaking free was only the beginning. At 19, Virginia Giuffre escaped Epstein and Maxwell's world. But freedom carried a heavy truth. What had happened to her was not just personal. It was systemic. It was powerful men exploiting vulnerable girls. It was silence protecting predators. It was injustice hiding in plain sight. And Virginia refused to stay silent. She began to speak. First quietly, then louder. First to those close to her, then to the world. She told her story, not because it was easy but because it was necessary. Her voice became a weapon. She testified. She gave interviews. She stood in courtrooms. She faced powerful lawyers, hostile media, and relentless scrutiny. She was doubted, questioned, attacked. But she kept going. Because justice mattered more than fear. Virginia's fight was not just about herself. It was about every girl who had been silenced. Every survivor who had been told their pain didn't matter. Every victim who had been buried under shame. She became a symbol of resistance. A reminder that predators can be exposed. That power can be challenged. That silence can be broken. Her courage helped bring Epstein's crimes into the light. Her testimony helped convict Ghislaine Maxwell. Her persistence forced the world to confront what had been hidden for too long. And here's the truth. Justice is never simple. It is messy. It is slow. It is painful. But it is worth it. Virginia's fight reminds us that justice is not just about punishment. It is about truth. It is about dignity. It is about giving survivors back their voices. She writes about the toll it took, the sleepless nights, the public attacks, the weight of reliving trauma. But she also writes about the victories, the moments when survivors stood together, the moments when predators were held accountable, the moments when silence was shattered. Her fight was not perfect, but it was powerful, and it changed the world. Virginia's advocacy became her legacy. She showed us that one voice can spark a movement, that one survivor can inspire thousands, that one story can shift the narrative. Her fight for justice is a call to all of us, to listen, to believe, to act. Because justice is not just the responsibility of courts. It is the responsibility of communities, of societies, of each of us. Virginia's story reminds us that justice is possible, that predators can be exposed, that survivors can rise. And her fight sets the stage for the final chapter, her legacy. Because even after her passing in 2025, her voice continues to echo. Her memoir ensures that her story will never be silenced. Her fight for justice lives on. Every story has an ending. But some endings are not final. Some endings echo long after the last page is turned. Virginia Giuffre's memoir, Nobody's Girl, is one of those stories. She passed away in April 2025. But before she left, she made sure her voice would remain. She wrote this book as her legacy, a way to ensure that her story, her fight, her truth would never be silenced. And that choice matters. Because predators thrive on silence. Systems thrive on silence. Injustice thrives on silence. Virginia's memoir breaks that silence, carries her light forward. It ensures that her story will continue to inspire, to challenge, to empower. She reminds us that survival is not the end. Survival is the beginning. That justice is not just about courts. Justice is about truth, about dignity, about refusing to be erased. Her legacy is not just her fight against Epstein and Maxwell. Her legacy is every survivor who now feels less alone. Every voice that now feels stronger. Every person who now believes that justice is possible. Virginia's story is not easy to hear. It is raw. It is painful. It is uncomfortable. But it is necessary. Because only in truth can healing begin. Only in courage can silence be broken. Only in legacy can light endure. And here's the invitation. Carry her light forward. Carry it in the way you listen. In the way you believe survivors. In the way you speak truth. In the way you refuse to let silence win. Virginia's story is not just hers. It is ours. It is a reminder that resilience is possible. That justice is worth fighting for. That light can shine even in the darkest places. So if you've made it this far, if you've felt the weight of her story, if you've felt the spark of her courage, this is your moment. To honor her. To carry her light. Keep her voice alive. And if you're ready to go deeper, to sit with her full memoir, to hold her words in your hands, to let her story change you, then I have something for you. Nobody's Girl. A memoir of surviving abuse and fighting for justice is available now. Link is given below in description. This link supports the channel and ensures Virginia's voice continues to reach the world. So go ahead, click, read, reflect, and then carry her light forward. 'Cause the world needs it. The world needs you.